How does a weak person develop real emotional strength? I know this question sounds harsh, but I think a lot of people are secretly asking it. No one likes to think of themselves as weak. We use softer language to protect our egos, whether it's sensitive, overwhelmed, anxious, emotionally fragile. But underneath all of these titles lies a terrifying question. What if I am just weak? This is not a question of shame, it is a question of capacity. Some people lack emotional strength. But weakness is not a permanent state, it is a sign of underdevelopment. I spent years running from this question. I wanted so badly to be a logical person, a disciplined person, a strong person. But when I took a hard look at my own behavior, it started to become clear that nearly every single action I took was an attempt to run away from some emotion that I didn't want to feel. And until I saw that clearly, there was no chance of changing it. The question is not whether emotional strength can be developed. I'm certain it can. The question is how someone who feels weak, reactive, and emotionally unstable can train themselves into having genuine emotional strength. Welcome to Progress Theory. My name is Garrett, and this is a podcast in which I explore what it takes for a human being to actually change and transform. To answer this question effectively, I think it's important for me to define what I mean by emotional strength. From my current understanding, someone who is emotionally strong is capable of feeling very distressing and overwhelming emotions or sensations, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, sadness, shame, loneliness, anger, isolation, some emotion that they don't want to feel and which feels overwhelming, without letting that emotion dictate their behavior or control what they do. Someone who is emotionally strong has a huge gap between the emotion they're feeling and the actions they take. Thus, someone who is emotionally weak is constantly acting in alignment with whatever emotion they feel. My current belief is this: emotional weakness is not a sign of failure, it is not a permanent state, it is not attached to your identity. I think emotional strength is a skill set that can be trained. And thus, emotional weakness is just a sign that someone needs to put in more practice and repetition into training this skill set. I think this belief is very powerful. Framing emotional strength in this way makes it far more trainable. At least when it comes to my life, I would attribute much of the growth I've experienced in the last 12 months to viewing emotional strength in this way. I used to be someone who was obsessed with being strong. And I didn't really give much thought to why. I knew that I wanted to be a strong person. I knew I wanted to be resilient. I wanted to be able to feel a lot of pain, whether emotional or physical, and keep going. It wasn't until recently that I recognized I so deeply craved strength because I felt weak and inadequate. At my core, I was terrified that I was a weak person, so I was desperate to prove otherwise. And I was living in delusion for a long time because when you looked at my behavior, I was a weak person. I was constantly running from difficult conversations. I was numbing myself out and medicating every emotion I felt through addictions and impulsive, instantly gratifying behavior. I was extremely inconsistent and lazy. I struggled to feel pain or discomfort and keep going. But I wouldn't let myself admit this because I attached this perception of weakness to my identity. And I was terrified. If I admit to the fact that I am a weak person, that means I will forever be a weak person. That means I will never be strong. I will never be resilient. I am stuck like this forever. And it wasn't until I was capable of owning this and owning I am a weak person now, but that does not mean that I have to stay a weak person forever. Just because I've allowed myself to become very fragile and weak does not mean I will stay fragile and weak. But until I was able to admit that to myself, I wasn't able to start taking steps forward to develop actual strength and resiliency. And I think I have a tendency to project my experiences onto other people. I assume the things that have happened to me, the things I've struggled with, are universally applicable. I'm sure they are not as universal as I think they are, but I don't think I'm alone in this. I think a lot of people struggle with feeling very confused, overwhelmed, terrified, and controlled by their emotions. I think a lot of people probably don't even realize how much their emotions are controlling the way they behave. They use avoidance, escapism, self deception, a myriad of different, usually subconscious strategies to avoid dealing with their emotions or recognizing that their emotions are driving their behavior. This can show up in so many different ways. It can be you just avoid conversations that you know you need to have. You know you need to talk to your partner or your children or your coworker, your boss. You know there's a conversation that is going to suck but needs to happen, and you just push it off and pretend like it's not important. It could be that you continuously go back to your ex, or you hang out with people that you know are influencing you negatively, you know you shouldn't be around because you're terrified of being and feeling alone. It could be that you push off and avoid doing the huge thing that you know you want to do. This is the career path you want to take. This is the hobby that you want to start engaging in. It terrifies you, but you know you want it. And you convince yourself that you don't because the terror you feel. I'd encourage you to ask yourself, in what ways might my emotions be impacting my behavior more than I realize? And how confident am I in my ability to manage and work through the most difficult emotions I feel? Based on my personal experience, there were three modes of failure that I had to work through before I started seeing real progress in developing my emotional strength. The first took me longer than any others. It is self-deception. In order to start gaining strength, in order to become more resilient and to be able to work through your emotions more efficiently, you have to own the fact that you currently are emotionally weak. And that term is harsh. No one likes to admit weakness, like we already talked about. But being able to see clearly that you are constantly acting in alignment with your most destructive emotions. Your emotions are pushing you to do things that you don't want to do, that aren't good for you, that move you away from the person that you want to become. Until you can recognize that, there's no hope of change. You have to own the fact that you are constantly being controlled by your emotional states. You have to start trying to catch it in real time. In order to create a gap between the emotion you feel and the action you take, you have to start becoming a lot more aware of your emotions when they are occurring. You have to be able to catch it before the automatic behavior happens. The second mode of failure, once you have started to recognize that your emotions drive almost all of your behaviors and that you're constantly running from them or running towards certain emotions, then you have to work through the shame. At least I did. I made this an identity problem. I attached my sense of self-worth to the weakness that I perceived myself to have. And it caused me to, even though I started to become aware of my lack of emotional strength, I wanted to just keep living in delusion. I wanted to keep escaping it, ignoring it, avoiding it, because it made me feel horrible about myself. And I was not able to detach my identity and my self-worth from my current level of strength when it came to my emotional capacity. And until I was able to really own and believe that my inability to control or work through my emotions effectively does not mean anything about the quality of who I am. It does not mean I'm stuck like this forever. It does not mean anything about my identity or my self-worth. I wasn't able to start taking clean steps to move forward. And then once I worked through that, once I really owned that I needed to start working on my emotional strength, that my emotions ruled my behavior, and I separated the weakness I felt from my identity and my self-worth, then comes the most important and tangible step. It does not matter if you figure those things out if you never use tools and put in the practice necessary to grow. Emotional strength is, if it's a skill set, it means you have to start training it deliberately. You have to do the right things. You have to take the steps that are going to make you more strong. And if you fail to do this, if you don't look for tools that help you gain strength or methods, if you don't bother to take opportunities to train the skill, you're never going to get better. It's not just something that awareness will fix. You have to start deliberately practicing it. By no means would I say I have reached any level of emotional mastery. I still constantly find myself being pulled in directions that I know I don't want to go. And a lot of the time, I'm able to resist, detach, and go the right direction. Sometimes I don't. This is still a skill set I'm developing by all means. But when I compare who I currently am to who I used to be, it is clear that I have made significant progress. And the main framework I've been using has been the thing that has allowed that progress to occur for me. And I think it will create progress for you as well. And it is this: emotional strength is a skill. To develop any skill, it requires deliberate practice and repetition. This creates a very powerful reframe. Negative emotions and very undesirable circumstances and sensations go from something that you dread, in which you try to avoid, to an opportunity to grow. The stronger the negative emotion, the greater the opportunity it is for deliberate and intentional practice. And this was huge for me because I spent so long just terrified of certain emotions. I was terrified of urges to engage in my addictive behavior. I was terrified to feel shame and loneliness. And I had this belief that once that emotion appears, I am screwed. I am going to act with it. It's going to take over. And once I was able to switch that and start telling myself when those emotions appear, it's like, this is the game. It is game time. This is my chance to practice. This is where the real opportunity for growth lies. It turns it into a challenge and almost a competition against yourself to see how well can I take this? How far can I go? How strong can I be in this moment? And that was huge for me because this is just like training physical strength. If you want to get stronger, you have to lift weights. But you can't just lift weights. You have to lift weights that are on the brink of being too much and causing you to break. You have to expose your body to stimulus that is very uncomfortable and painful and feels almost impossible to handle. And by doing that repeatedly, you start to force your body to really grow. And so, in that sense, building emotional strength is the same thing. You can't do that if you're not experiencing strong negative emotions. And that means every time you feel a strong emotion you don't want to feel, that is the trigger for it being an opportunity. That is the sign that, okay, this is my chance to get stronger. I can use this to build. This is a real opportunity, something that I actually look forward to. And I'm excited to see how much resolve I can build in this moment. But that is a mindset shift. A more practical approach to doing this Because like I said, this is training. It is real, deliberate practice. When you feel there's two different parts. One is awareness, training your ability to catch the negative emotions when they appear so that you don't just act automatically. Because that's the problem. That's my biggest issue is a lot of the time I just don't become mindful of the emotions I'm feeling in time to redirect myself. A lot of people, including me, spend most of their life just in this constant state of reaction to their thoughts and emotions. And so, training that capacity, trying to recognize as quickly as possible, this is the emotion I'm feeling and this is what it's pushing me towards. That is the first step. Someone who's really good at that is going to be able to widen that gap between emotion and reaction. But then the next step is being able to identify the emotion and sit with it. Because even if you identify, if it feels too overwhelming and if you get lost in it, you still will get controlled. So, training the ability to identify the emotion and just sit with it and feel it and then take an opposite action, that is the skill set that will make you truly resilient and strong. And so, a method that I've been using to do this is when I feel a strong negative emotion, that is the trigger for training. I identify what emotion am I feeling. I set a 3-minute timer and I start to just try to feel it in my body. Where is this emotion? Where do I feel it? What thoughts are it? Is it triggering? What action is it pushing me to take? What is the thing that I find myself wanting to do right now? And then I just practice sitting with it. I just try to feel it fully and recognize like I don't have to act on this. This is not part of who I am. I'm not identified with this emotion. I can just sit with it and be with it. And then once that timer goes off, then you choose a different behavior. You recognize this is what my emotion is pushing me towards. I know I don't want to do this thing. It takes me farther away from the person I want to be. I'm going to do this action instead. And by doing this, you start to train your capacity to recognize emotions before you act on them and take logical, rational actions, even when your emotions are pushing you towards something else. And you're not always going to succeed. There's going to be a lot of times where you miss the emotion entirely, or you discover it, but you still give into it and take the action that you know you don't want to take. But over time, you will start building strength and resolve. You'll get better and better at feeling difficult emotions without letting them consume you or control you. And I think someone who really trains this skill reaches a point where they are constantly able to control their behavior and manage their emotions no matter how overwhelming they might feel. So, no matter where you're starting from, hopefully there is something there in the framing tool or the actual practical method that will help you start building your emotional resolve. This has been episode 16 of Progress Theory. For anyone listening, I appreciate you. This podcast is definitely in its infancy. Everything about this is new. I'm still working on it, still trying to build. So if you've listened this far, please know I appreciate your time. If you felt like you got some value out of this, you enjoyed hearing the discussion about emotional strength, follow or subscribe if you want to see future episodes about human transformation, change, and well-being. If you are a driven man in your 20s who is stuck in a start strong, collapse, reset loop, I have built a free challenge that will help you start breaking this loop and building lasting momentum. Head to progresstheory.com to learn more. The link is in the description. If you listened this far, I wish you all the progress you are looking for in your life, and I will see you next time.